right, my people, we got a great one today. Dr. Matthew Alvord from Minnesota, one of the warmest states in the country. I just had the honor of spending some quality time with him in Clearwater, Florida, and at a DE meeting, which was an absolutely incredible meeting. But it's just a true blessing to call this guy one of my brothers, one of my close inner circle men. I love him dearly. Welcome, Dr. Matt. Love you, pal.
Thanks, buddy. Same here.
So, we just got on this thing and we're like, what are we going to talk about? I'm like, Innate's going to provide, man. And 2023 for me is like it seems to be just, if there ever has been a time of no more bullshit, not that you and I have ever put up with bullshit, but I really want to talk about like where the hell chiropractic is going and how come the world just doesn't know about freaking chiropractic. Like you and I, for an example, were on a big political call last night. And I think everybody wants the same thing, but no one's taking massive action. So I think it's time to start creating a strategy to take freaking massive action, brother.
Yeah. I think the illusion is that we have more time than we think we do.
Yeah.
That's it. So
I love it.
We were going to check out in 5 minutes. How would this next 5 minutes go? And that's what I always get from you, which is a very attractive quality. And my new jam is awareness.
Yeah.
Being right here, right now, present time. That's it. That's all I have. I've never had anything else. And so if I do that, how will I handle my role as a chiropractor? Anything in the future? The future will take care of itself if I handle right now 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what has to happen, though, is we have to have a strategy of creating an expectation for right now. Because there's a lot of things that people could do right now, which is a complete waste of time. But creating the vision of afar, because afar becomes near real quick. And when near gets here, we want to know that we accomplished something.
Yeah, being busy is not it.
Being busy is not it. And I think, and that's one of the things that I really felt over the past 2 years as our profession has been very busy. There's a lot of talk. But now 2 years later, nothing has changed. And that has created a lot of frustration for me.
Yeah. Well, part of this 2 years was being forced on a certain level not to be able to do things. And it gave people an out, gave people an excuse and saying, I can't do it because of X, Y, and Z versus finding ways around it anyway.
100%. 100%. So laying out a plan and a strategy, which is it's time for our profession to take heed of a call that you and I, we could sit and talk all day long about, is now putting that vision out for the younger generation and then the older generation to make things happen now. Mm-hmm. You listen to some of these guys talk about, and they say, chiropractors see 7% of the population, which I don't know how they come up with that number. I think we see more, but that's ridiculous if that's true.
Mm-hmm. I think those numbers will take care of themselves if we just do our job. I love the David Goggins quote. I'm sure you know who he is. David Goggins.
Yeah.
His 40% rule. Just when you think you have nothing left in the tank, you've only reached 40% of your potential.
Only 40%.
Only 40%. And this is the Navy SEAL and Navy SEALs. This is the guy that Navy SEALs don't like to train with because he makes them look bad.
Right.
So for all our last breath efforts, or what we think is, we're just tapping our potential, just scratching the surface of our potential. But those numbers, I think, take care of themselves if we get into the immediacy of uncompromised. What are we really about? Opening ourselves up to these younger docs and these students, being available, and just letting it all fly, letting it all just happen. Unabashed, nothing left in the tank, constantly being able to field phone calls, questions, opportunities, because there's opportunities within the opportunities. So that's my new thing, just being more aware. And the awareness for me comes from just, we can throw this word abundance around, but then the more aware I become, the more I realize the abundance that I've missed between everything. So but when I look back, I see so much waste that I thought I was taking advantage of. But now that I'm more aware of things, I realize how much more potential I had. And that's that mindset I'm trying to get into now, where when you talk about, we're only seeing 7 or 10% or whatever, I think that'll take care of itself. If we get that done between our ears, because we can't force people to do things. We don't want to force people to do things. That we do live in an outside-in world. And so we're not going to reach 100%. Well, we might reach them with the message, but outside in is going to be outside in. But we definitely are going to reach a lot more people if we just, just like the subluxation, we just let go of the condition, of the illness, of the outcome, and concentrate on the income of connection without interference through the adjustment. Then everything else takes care of itself. So I don't want to, I like to say I'm more than ever, I'm less concerned with solutions. Everybody's got answers. Most of them are wrong. I'm interested in the right question, and everything else to take care of itself. I'm just interested in what is the right question, because everybody's walking around like amoeba going, how do I feel better? How do I get rid of my thing? Instead of going, what is the right question? Because if I do that, inevitably I will answer it, right? So I'm just interested in the system, meaning my input, the system being the output being right, if that input is correct, and then the output will take care of itself. Because for me, that 7% is output. You know what I mean? Like ultimately, I don't want to change that. I want to figure out where I'm going to have interference with the process, because that system will get that up from 7 to 17 to 30 or whatever. You know what I mean? So I kind of look at it. I funnel everything through chiropractic philosophy now.
Right.
I even take the 33 principles. In fact, this is just how crazy I am. Like this morning, I was going through all the 33 principles and assigning the spiritual equivalent as a parallel. You know what I mean? Like the major premise is about awareness, really. The last principle of demand and supply is ask and you shall receive. It's not receive and you shall ask. Right. So I'm just trying to funnel everything through that. And just so your question as you ask it, I'm just going, how would I handle that as a chiropractor? Not just a chiropractor just trying to see more people, but through the chiropractic principles.
Right. Well, that's a big thing, is chiropractic is more than just, a profession. It's a way of life because of those principles.
It's a life philosophy.
It's a whole philosophy that could be, my whole family lens is operated through that, and it flows right through our whole spiritual beliefs and, our faith in God, et cetera. It all becomes one, and I think by asking many questions, it's just allowed those worlds to merge and for us to build our entire life, where that word abundance seems to come in with people to define what they're doing, because everybody feels they need to define what they're doing, because then it helps them feel accomplished or significant. But at the end of the day, it comes to getting more people to find their mission and purpose within that realm, to now educate the world about it, and people will start latching onto it. And you look at our profession for well over 125 years, and that has not happened. That has not happened. And my question is, why?
I think it's because we have human beings practicing this profession. So it's kind of built in, and it's just like, in our practices, 20% of our people refer 80% of our clients. 20%, probably less, of the people in our profession are getting 80% of the work done. I think that's a law in itself. And if we just recognize it and work with it, there's just a dynamic there. The fruitfulness comes from these relatively few trees that are following and doing the right things. And we can't expect all seeds to bear fruit.
Right. And that's it. That 20% is very interesting, because I worked with a consultant who told me that 80% of the profession and practice should be working for somebody. Like they shouldn't be in practice by themselves just because of the energy and everything that goes into it. And I thought that was kind of odd in the beginning, but then it makes a lot of sense. If you look at the 20%, that maybe they just resonate at a different level and we just accept that fact. And then we work better as a profession on bringing in the right people, to build an organization instead of a little mom and pop office, what the profession could look like with that, like really accepting our roles, on a higher level and creating a standard for that.
Yeah. Psychologists say that there's a good fraction of people, I forget what it was like 2/3 of the population is psychologically already set up to be followers.
Right.
Right? But then they have to trust people, right?
Right.
Like with what you're building, being able to trust somebody like you to work with you is really important for these chiropractors. Whatever direction they go, if they start out in that direction with you, that's an excellent place to start.
And then one of the biggest steps is getting people to be able to trust the process, whether it's, a patient falling under care and we know they're nervous and they have stories in their head about, what they're getting into. And then it's just not changing their story, but letting it naturally just turn into a news story by getting results and creating an experience and teaching our principles that just once they hear that, it makes perfect sense. And I've had thousands of patients say, this profession is so misunderstood. And the street Steve just gets tired of hearing that. It's I want that to change. I want our profession to once and for all get this message out there. So, when you said in the beginning, what are we about? Maybe that's the better question. As a profession, we need to stop the train and say, what are we about?
Yeah, I think if chiropractors really had a heart to heart with themselves and they just relaxed and realize that our principles are rock solid. There's nothing more solid.
Right.
Our founder said that was the biggest idea he knew of. I can't think of a better philosophy, right? So when you look at the philosophy and you just trust it like gravity, that's why Sid talked about dropping the keys. I mean, we wouldn't have to sit around and have a whole conference about certainty and about confidence about keys dropping. It would be stupid because you're like, they just drop.
Right.
But if we had that kind of matter of factness with our philosophy, we would just relax and just start educating people without trying to sell, without trying to control and anticipate a particular outcome. We would just sit down and have that conversation with people, knowing we're talking about gravity. It's the same thing. It's the same thing, So,
right. And then, it's, I get these kids where you start, these kids, I call them kids now. And I asked them about the 33 principles and they never heard of them and they're ready to graduate. And that becomes frustrating. But the better question is, what are we doing about it? So one of the action steps we're taking is creating DE clubs on campuses where we have these things to expose the kids to, because without those principles, all else follows, which is going to be struggle, because now they're struggling with belief. If they're struggling with their own belief, what's going to happen to their patients? And it's not sustainable. It's a sinking ship.
Yeah. I mean, a physicist is not very confident without their laws of physics.
Right.
So, I mean, those are basically our physics laws.
Right.
So how are we supposed to get anything done without knowing those?
Right.
Gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, though that's a law, right? So we not only know how they fall, we can predict how everything's going to fall. Well, if you have that kind of certainty, who wouldn't we tell about that? If they didn't know what that was. And how is a physicist who has none of these laws supposed to develop any kind of certainty? They're going to get lost in some weird, wacky thing.
Yeah.
The latest therapy, the latest whatever, and not realize they've got the world in their hands before they even start searching.
Right. So I had a conversation, excuse me, with a couple people this morning. And, what I've seen in the past is people will get involved in a club on campus and then you'll have maybe one fired up, two fired up people, and they're just getting together, just talking. So I said, we need to devise a playbook, something, a guideline for them to go off of. Because I know I've done it long enough with Band of Brothers, et cetera, that I'm going to have to lead the meeting and create the energy and at least create a conversation. That's not always easy. You have a bad day. Maybe you don't want to be there, but you have to be there. So a template for them, a playbook of something to just they could open up to and say, okay, we're talking about this today. And they can just ask a question and sit back and not talk. Because I've done that, because a lot of times it's just me talking, me talking, me talking. But now I feel like, all right, you guys have been coming here long enough. What is innate intelligence? What do you guys think? What really is innate intelligence? And I sit back and don't say a word. And it seems like eternity. And then one person across the room says something. And it starts out awkward, but then it picks up into a whole conversation and then a cool jam. And every now and then I jump in and say something and maybe redirect it, et cetera. So I'll read off what I wrote. And then I'd like to get your perspective on, well, what about these thoughts or these things to have in a playbook that we get young leaders, students within the programs to be able to host meetings, whether it's weekly, once a month, where they could just create discussions. Because I know when I was in school, we would argue, is universal intelligence God? What is innate intelligence? What? I don't believe in that. And then you would hammer it. And then I would go back to the green books and study it and Stevenson's, all that. Because if you wanted to go back and have an argument, you better be prepared. But the more you challenged it and questioned it, it just became simpler. So I'm going to throw out some of the things that I said. Universal intelligence, innate, subluxation, the 33 principles, D.D. Palmer, BJ, Sid, Harvey, Drop the Keys, the Bell Tower story, Leaves in the Stream, the story of that something, Clearview, 1935 to 51, BJ's research, Use to Control, the chemistry of life, the clips of Dr. Umber's interview we did with the whole history of him and Sid and chiropractic and DE, and the history of life, et cetera. I mean, those were just some thoughtful ideas that came out. Anything jump out in your mind?
I think, when we do orientations here, I always try to hit people from left field right off the bat. Hey, listen, we don't treat symptoms. My goal is not for you to feel better. So I do that. One of the things I hear from marketing people is the first thing you want to do is interrupt. So I would take the most controversial thing, the biggest hot wire question you had, and I would lead with that, because that's going to start to pique some emotions and some stuff that's sitting there, stewing in these kids. Because I would get the niceties out of the way right away. I would literally start addressing stuff. What do you mean chiropractic doesn't treat anything? What are you supposed to, What are you supposed to do with that? Even most chiropractors think they're treating stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I would take any of that stuff that could sit sideways with a student, and I would lead with that stuff first. That's my thing.
So what would be some big questions then that you would lead with?
When I speak at the school here at Northwestern, I'll say things, is inflammation good or bad? Is a fever good?
Yeah.
Is pain good? Is muscle spasm good? Is cancer good? Right? The students always, they smell a trick question. But I always tell people, dead people can't get any of those strategies.
Right.
So if you can live at least for the moment with that strategy, you are not dead. Congratulations, innate. Right? Because people go, well, sometimes inflammation is bad, sometimes it's good. When? Right? So that's the kind of stuff, because right away, I think our educated outside-in brain we have before we become chiropractors can't help but to judge and condemn the body's functions for some reason or another. And then the only ethical thing to do from that point on is to suppress it, get rid of it, treat it.
Right.
Instead of celebrating, first of all, for what it is. I don't know how to make cancer. I don't know how to make inflammation. Body's doing that as a strategy. There's a good reason why it's doing it. So the number one question is, why is the body doing that? But the first premise is, again, principle number 25, innate intelligence never destroys the tissues in which it works. Never. Never is the most important word in that sentence for me.
Right.
Exceptions. So why is it doing that? Because if somebody gives any little out to go, well, innate's good except for this, that's where the first slip is. And it happens in the classroom before it happens in practice.
Right.
So that's my take.
So within the whole philosophy, the verbiage restrictions of matter, I know that would always come up as we started getting deeper and we got more educated in our philosophy. At what point do we now need outside in intervention, right? Because we'd always had the argument, and I was one of them, I will never go to a medical doctor. And I asked, some of my older mentors too, do you ever get a physical? No way. I don't go near those people. Do you ever get this? No way. And then honestly, I saw them end up expressing health in ways they didn't like, and they died. And then you realize, well, maybe if they got medical intervention, and that's when the whole restrictions of matter came into my mind. It's like, all right, at what point, like this innate, almost losing the battle, like if that's possible, and at what point do we say, okay, this is restrictions of matter, I need some outside help, and you hear the stories. Well, if you're in a car accident and I'm bleeding on the middle of the road, don't bring me to the chiropractor to get adjusted, get me to the hospital. So that's obvious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as soon as you get away from our principles, Reggie Gold said, you'll never lose an argument in chiropractic as long as you stay on chiropractic.
Yeah.
But as soon as we have to consider any kind of therapeutic mindset, it's all guesswork. And that's not to take away from it, because like you said, at some point, somebody might have to guess as a lesser two evils, but it's still guesswork.
Right.
No way around that. So the short answer is nobody knows.
True.
So you might as well listen to somebody in a white jacket with the output after their name and study your neighbor when it comes to guessing, right? Because at least they've spent a bunch of years guessing in college over it versus somebody who's mowing their lawn next door to you. Do you know what I mean? So, but it's all guesswork. Nobody knows.
Right.
Nobody knows. So yeah. So ultimately, I'd say I don't know. I know that when I love Sid's comment. It's so concise. When he'd adjust people, he would just simply say, "You're better." Period.
That's right.
There's a certainty in that. You're a better version of yourself. You've just been adjusted. After that, it's all guesswork.
Well, that's when it was so simplified back then. Those guys were just like, you're just better off without a subluxation, which has always been my message to the patients. It's like, I don't know what's going on, but I know once I adjust you, you're better off. And now your body's doing the work. I just sit back and watch the show.
Yeah. I just put a post up the other day that came to mind. And I said, if you do, what did I say? If you do more than the adjustment, how did I say that? Oh, trying to anticipate what the adjustment should do is above your pay grade, but not adjusting them when they need it is below your pay grade.
Say that again.
So trying to anticipate what an adjustment should do or should not do to somebody is above our pay grade.
Right.
Simply not adjusting somebody because they need an adjustment, that's below our pay grade. So we need to stay in our lane, stay in our pay grade. We got to get away from what we think it should do and just do it because they're just better.
So what is our lane? What is our chiropractic lane?
Recognizing innate intelligence, concern for interference to it, and then our sole purpose after that is restoration through the chiropractic adjustment. It's
So say it again.
So principle-wise, it would be principle number one, major premise, recognizing innate intelligence or recognizing intelligence.
Yeah.
And it's just universal in life, in us, right? And then principle 31 is the subluxation. And then principle 34, as I like to jokingly say, because restoration isn't within the 33 principles, and you can't have chiropractic without it, is restoration. So it's recognition of innate intelligence, concern for interference to it, and then the sole aim of chiropractic, remember it, it's right in Stevenson, is restoration. And that's chiropractic adjustment. So it's those three things. It's either Reggie's Z or Reggie's letter N, your Z. It's the same thing, right? So you got expression, interference, restoration. That's it. But before we can do anything, we have to recognize an intelligence. Otherwise, why would we go looking for interference to anything? So we have to recognize it, remove interference, or recognize it, see that it gets interference, and remove interference to it. That's it. Those three things.
So sharper questions, right? We have 300 chiropractors that recognize that and abide by that. Now we want our communities to know that, right? We want our communities to for me, I want my community to recognize intelligence. and then realize, which is faith in their creation that's within them. It's what they were born with. But then my term, how's your atlas, screws that up. How's your atlas question mark, which means, are you subluxated? And my whole MO for me in my area here is I want to be able to go to the grocery store, or my patient goes to the grocery store, not me, because I know what I'll say. And the checkout girl just is having a bad day. And my patient says, how's your atlas? Right? And that little girl comes in, starts getting checked. And now her MO when she wakes up is, I feel awesome, but I'm going to get my atlas checked. I feel off. I'm going to get my atlas checked. How's my atlas? I feel moody today. The kids are moody today. How's your atlas? So branding chiropractic, getting the message out for people to recognize the importance of living subluxation free as a profession. How can we hone our skills to get that message out there?
Well, people are afraid to talk about intelligence, innate intelligence, because it gets confused with God. I mean, you actually have a Bible in our orientation room, so people can do whatever they want with that. But you got to start there. You got to start there. And I like how you talk about how's your atlas, because it gets people asking a question of, is there anything in the way of that intelligence? Because at the end of the day, we don't know what our cholesterol levels are, regardless of whether we think they're good or bad, or we don't know what they are. We can't go, I'm feeling like 217 today, right? We can't feel that, but we can't feel our subluxations either. So even if somebody feels great, or if somebody comes in and I say, hey, let's get your kids checked, and they'll go, oh, they're fine. I go, how do you know? Because you can't feel the subluxation. Even if you're having symptoms or a condition related to subluxation, you are not feeling your subluxation any more than the plaque on a heart that produced a heart attack or death. At no point was that plaque lining that blood vessel painful. But it led to symptoms or a condition and maybe somebody's demise. But at no point did that person ever say, boy, my plaque is hurting me today.
Right.
Same thing with the subluxation. So how are you doing? How's your atlas? Oh, and by the way, you can't feel how your atlas is doing. So you have to have it checked. Just like your cholesterol or any other objective finding that's going on, regardless of your experience.
But for them to buy in to the principle of having it checked regularly, which I tell them is every week for the rest of their life, because life is just an absolute mess compared to BJ Palmer's times. They have to buy into that principle that a misaligned vertebra actually causes interference. Your science heads actually cause interference to the transmission of that mental impulse.
Yeah.
And I think that's, we've seen the quarter, the weight of a dime on a nerve and all that stuff. It's like, it gets exhausting just pointing this shit out to people, but it's, what I tell people, because they say, well, I want evidence-based chiropractic. I'm like, I've been adjusting people for over 20 years and they just get better. That's enough evidence for me. Like, you give me one other medical profession that's been researched on human beings as long as chiropractic, I don't believe there's one out there. I really don't. We've been doing it for, close to 130 years, millions of people getting adjusted and just getting better. How do you refute that? We know why they want to refute it, which we don't even need to recognize. They're irrelevant. But the more people start to recognize it and recognize the intelligence within them, they're going to want to nurture that and connect to it.
Yeah. You get to a point where if they're just in a different philosophy, they may not be reachable, or at least in that moment, right?
Yeah.
But I like the saying, ultimately you have to ask, what evidence will you accept? Because the physics people, the materialists, will always downgrade that relationship between intelligence, force, and matter. They will always downgrade it into a physical experience, a physical problem, just matter. The world's just matter that runs its course like billiard balls.
Right.
So this philosophy will never make sense to those people unless they get to a different place. And there's no way for us to downgrade our triune into a un. into a mono. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way for us to do that. So I think, like you were saying to begin the call, is that we have to just reach as many people as possible with full confidence and whatever. And again, the key for me, again, is just physiologically relaxing. I walked in an orientation room yesterday, and Vicky goes, this guy does not want to get adjusted. He'll hear what you have to say, but he already said he doesn't want to get adjusted. Well, guess what? 15 minutes later, he's on the table getting a toggle recoil, right?
Yeah.
So, and then couldn't believe how he's doing so much better, and then asking how our membership works, right? So, but the key for me was like, okay, you can't pull people over, right? So I just sat down, relaxed, really realized I had the truth, and I just worked with his own energy, and I let it just all pour out, because at the end of the day, the higher energy is going to win. The higher philosophy is going to win. And so we need to just rest easy at that, but then just keep reaching people. You don't have to anticipate effects. He could have still said, yeah, no. But the principles that work in the orientation took care of themselves, and I just trusted that. And I'm sure he could feel that. I wasn't trying to force anything. I was going to talk him onto that table. But he ultimately just said, okay, yeah, let me just see what you find. Let's see what, okay. Oh, you want to get adjusted? Cool. Let's open that up. Let's give you a first experience without interference. Never been adjusted before, you know?
Right. There's a huge principle there that every chiropractor, let alone the young students, should listen to over and over again, with the conversation you had with Vicky before walking in that room, and how you could have received that. You could have gone in there, horns up, shove it down his throat. Chiropractic's been around this long. We go to school this many years. You realize what we do, and blah, 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 blah. Instead of accepting him at his level, not changing your energy and outcome, but connecting with him and what you had to do as a man to connect with another man, that 15 minutes later, he's on your table getting adjusted and asking about signing up.
And the young chiropractor in me did that.
I'm sure dude, you're a different man than you were like 5 years ago. I mean,
and I would have prided myself showing him the door, and the guy would have been so excited the rest of his life, and he would have never walked into another chiropractor's office ever again.
That's right. You would have felt awesome. Like I rocked his world.
Yeah. I showed him.
Yeah. But what you showed him was lasting purpose, love.
Yeah. I like Dean. Dean had said on the stage a while ago, it really hit me. Dean said, if you have the truth, start acting like it.
Beautiful.
And if you got the truth, are you going to sit there and try to convince somebody about gravity? You're just going to show it and go, listen, it either makes sense to you or it doesn't. I can show you 3 or 4 other examples of gravity, but really now it's up to you. What would you like? Do you want a better life by recognizing gravity or not?
Yeah.
And so you don't have to bowl anybody over or try to control anybody, because on some level, to be honest about it, then I'm not accepting the laws that I'm working with walking into that room.
Yeah. I used to have a hard time with those engineering physicist types, the overthinkers, and I've thrown many people out of my office and it felt good. And then I grew up one day and I said, well, if I really want to take care of everybody, I got to improve on how I connect with these people. So this guy came in, had a big engineering degree, owned a big electrical company in town, and his wife made him come in. And it was one of those where you go in and they got their arms crossed. And I went in and went to shake my hands. He said, I don't feel like shaking hands. I don't want to be here. My wife made me do it. So I said, wow. So you're one of those pussy husbands that does whatever your wife tells you to do. So I'm like, we're either going to fight right now. And he kind of looked at me and smiled. I said, bro, I don't want you to be unhappy, but obviously she loves you for a reason. And maybe there's something we could do to help you. And he goes, well, what can you help me with? I said, well, maybe we could un-asshole you. So he goes, well, I just don't believe in all this stuff. I said, what is this stuff? I said, I haven't even introduced myself yet. He goes, well, you're Dr. Steve. You're like the miracle worker. She told me all about you. Bah, 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 bah. I said, oh, are you upset that your wife loves me? He's like, bro, you're relentless. And now he's got his arms crossed. He's chilled a little bit. And I said, listen, my man, I said, I have a great life. I got a great office. I don't need you here. But there's potential you're here for a reason that's going to improve the quality of your life. That's all I care about. If I can't help you, I'll tell you to leave. He goes, is there anybody you can't help? I said, no. He said, well, see, you're selling everybody this. I said, I sell life. And I showed him the tattoo on my hand. I got life tattooed on my hand. That's what I sell. What I'm going to show you today, when you come back on your next visit, that's showing you that's impeding your expression of life. I know that we free that up, and that's my only job. And he's like, well, you can't fix anything. I said, no, you've got damage that's going to be there forever. I said, but I can un-asshole you. I can get you to relax. I can get you to be more loving and nurturing and to chill out. And he just looked at me like I was nuts. That dude's been a patient for like 18 years. Like our conversation, and then we were able to talk. But to be able to meet him at his level, and I wasn't going to change what I do, but to almost call him out lovely. Well, not almost, I did. But he was just a big rhino, successful guy. So I said, look, you use the word believe. And I said, you own an electrical company. I said, you believe in electricity? I said, absolutely. I go, why do you believe in electricity? He goes, well, that's a stupid question. It's everywhere. Blah, 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 blah. It runs the whole world. I said, I don't believe in it. He goes, well, that's stupid. I said, that's how I feel when people say they don't believe in chiropractic. He goes, why? I said, have you ever seen electricity? He said, well, of course. I said, no. You see the expression of electricity. You don't see electricity. And he goes, well, that's interesting. And I said, and I don't see people's nerve interference go away and them get better with chiropractic. I see the expression of living without nerve interference. And he goes, I'm going to have to think about that one. And about 6 months later, he's coming in now. And he goes, I finally get it. He goes, I've been, every time we do a job and like they'll do these big shopping centers and malls, he does huge jobs. He said, you know, we go into this structure and I'm running all these wires and it all comes back to a main box. He said, Dr. Steve, that's your brain stem. And he said, the master switches that if there's an emergency, we have to shut it down. That's your atlas. And he goes, when we wire everything and we click on all the lights and power to function, and he goes, that's the adjustment. And I'm like, dude, you got it. You got it. And if I gave up on this guy and I backpedaled and overwhelmed, where would he be now? And his kids, his grandchildren now get adjusted. And I don't know why I brought that up, but it was the communication level of owning what we are and what we do and recognizing the intelligence. I loved how you said that, because to me, I recognize the intelligence, and that's my only thing, is to get people just to look at that and then realize what a subluxation does, you know, hashtag how's your atlas.
Masterfully done. And that's a master of the philosophy that does that. Yeah, and the other thing I picked up was analogies are huge. I call an analogies nature's thesaurus. So it's just analogies connect two unrecognized truths, right? So now I'm going through the principles and I'm seeing this spiritual parallel, and I'm rewriting our principles as a spiritual parallel, because I'm not necessarily saying they're the same thing, but there are parallels that if I recognize them, I know I'm going to get more out of each one of those things.
Right.
So people are living lesser lives because they know how their car works and the relationship of the oil light to the oil pan. But because they haven't connected cause and effect in the same way in their bodies, they're paying a price. And look at how many people are going to tell that oil light analogy in chiropractic offices today, and that'll be the one thing that gets that person started with care, because they get it, because they understand their car, but they didn't understand their bodies. But now they have this parallel. We go, holy crap, that's the same truth. I'm ready to get started with my chassis.
Yeah.
And that has to be inside out, right? Like the guy had to come up with that analogy on his own.
Yeah. Yeah. But we introduced, you know, we threw the seeds down. And over time, those seeds, you know, they took fruit and they got roots. And then he was able to breed a new life and thought process for himself. And I didn't have to sell him on a damn thing.
Yeah.
That's how, yeah. But what I want to do, man, now is I want our profession to do this on a whole, where we could equip offices to say, okay, every office that's part of this program, on October 31st, we're going to put billboards up that say this. We're going to have flashcards that any restaurant, anywhere you go, staff's going to go around town and hand out 5,000 of them, all with one single message. that's happening in 50 states, right? And we could do other countries. Single message, radio blurbs, things, podcasts, conversations, single message that you flood in all areas with the single message, because time and repetition, you hit different visual, hearing, all kinds of different stimulations with the single message. And chiropractic is at the forefront of it. What happens when they see it enough? They start to think and realize and create conversation. And hey, did you see this? And I heard this, and I read this thing. And it's now when they get in front of a chiropractor, they're like, yeah, I heard about that, or yeah, I saw your ad about that, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, imagine if we could create that tsunami of the message, without attachment to the results, because you're going to get people to say, well, how do I become the solo office that does it? No, we're doing this to create a movement, to create awareness, to wake people up that, you time it where you do it, 6 times a year, and it's the exact thing. And it's just, people wake up and like, holy cow, what just happened? I think that would be brilliant marketing. And to me, marketing is not an ad where I'm putting out a $21 visit to get a new patient in and try to bait and switch them under care. But marketing is I'm educating them, creating a relationship. I'm sharing our truth with them that they can wake up someday and go, I need to check this out. Yeah. I need to go have a conversation with this guy. And then you can have a conversation. We're doing an event. It's my first run at it. It's called The Talk. And it's funny because, you and I have talked about this. It's, you go speak at every event and chiropractic event, you talk to chiropractors, and then you go back a year later and nothing's changed, right? So I said, okay, we got to get out to the community, which is why I wrote Wake Up Humans, to try to reach people. Like, we got to get to the people, and we need more disciples getting to the people, where I want to be able to go out to communities where I have no attachment other than dropping the truth and then funneling them to an office. So I could fly into Minnesota, put on a huge event, the lead doctor shares, I get up and share the truth. People get fired up, they're signing up for care, and the outcome is to get families under regular care because it just makes sense. No bait and switch. And we were sitting there, and I had it on my whiteboard, and I'm just relentless. What are we going to call this thing? It's got to be catchy. What are we going to call this thing? And I had it titled The Talk, because when 3 a.m, I wake up, and what am I going to talk about in The Talk? And I have my notes, and I always, The Talk. We're going to call it The Talk. I have an intern. She's like, why don't you just call it The Talk? You keep calling it The Talk. And I'm like, shit, you're right. Simple. The Talk. I feel like as society now, it's time for the talk, a conversation. We got to open conversations with fellow humans from a loving space. Like, it's not about believing in chiropractic, but let's have just stop thinking for a minute. Let's just have a freaking conversation. And if it doesn't make sense to you, carry on. But if it makes sense to you, like you said with this guy, I'm going to adjust you and just give you a taste of it. It's going to give you a taste of it. Just try it. And I'll tell patients, do it for 6 months. If it doesn't resonate after 6 months, if nothing's changed in your life and this is just silly to you, then quit. But give it 6 months. And, large percent of them that do it, they're like, I'm never stopping. This just makes perfect sense to me. But the whole point being is, moving forward, is as a profession to stop just the small talk amongst each other, but creating a strategy of getting the message out there to people now. Like, I love my fellow chiropractors, but I don't need to see what they're eating in a day and their workouts. It's fun to see their lifestyle, cool, but let's hone our message on why people should be in their office.
Yeah. And you keep bringing it up, but time and repetition. And we got to keep doing it. You're not looking at any one particular time, not getting disappointed because somebody's not getting it in one exposure or 5. Or marketers will tell you it takes 20 to 100 exposures a lot of times for people to actually finally act and do something.
Yeah.
The same thing with the chiropractors. We got to keep putting it out, different messages, different ways. I see market as strategic exposure. Right. So you're constantly exposing people, but you're not doing it just haphazardly, necessarily dropping flyers out of an airplane. You're doing it in a crafted way that you don't necessarily know how it's going to be received, but you're kind of angling it in a way that's going to make more sense one way versus another. And then you might try a different angle the next time or whatever, but you kept saying it And it's so true though, but it's time and repetition, and then not being discouraged by the outcome, because again, we have this, in chiropractic, we talk about the concussion of forces, external invasive, internal resistive. Well, we've got an outside in philosophy world with an inside philosophy, right? Yeah. So we can't get dismayed because we've always been the minor player. Maybe we'll always be the minor player, but maybe we'll be 49% minor. But either way, we have to just keep putting the message out different ways, not getting dismayed, and keep going, that next starfish on the beach, and just keep working and not being worried about how many may not make it or how many are ahead of us, and just keep concentrating on that next person in front of us, the next ad, the next flyer, the next chiropractor in a hallway at a meeting. Yeah. We just got to keep in that mindset of that, just keep going on.
I love it. So let's start closing this out. And as you were talking, I had a thought. I'll put you on the spot. I gave you $5,000 tomorrow, and you had 3 minutes to come up with a billboard and what you want 30,000 people a day driving by and reading. They're going to look up and see this thing on their commute to work every day. On the way back, it's facing the other way. And it's one message from Matt Alvord. What do you think that would be?
Well, Frank could go a bunch of different directions there. My first reaction was Got Life.
Yep.
That can get lost with a milk ad. But something that comes to mind is, are you tired of the wrong answers? Are you tired of the wrong, quote unquote, solutions? How about getting the right questions, right? We're in a world full of dashboard mechanics. We're the engine specialists. Find out more about how your car actually works, how your chassis actually works. I don't know. I love to do these mental exercises, but the thing is, right away, I get stuck in a certain pattern where, and I'm sure you do this too, where, boy, that might be a great angle here, and then you're going to miss people left and right of that. But then you have to be willing to modify that in different other ways, right, for the other people that might be missing. Or it's the exact right message, but they're going to have to drive down that road to work 30 times before they go, what is that?
Yeah.
Or maybe we have something that would be a relatively normal message, but just the way our society is, just misspell a word. And they'll call up aggravated that you misspelled this up, right? And you're like, okay, great, come on in. Tell me how I misspelled it.
Yeah.
Book 50 minutes in my office so you can tell me how I misspelled that ad.
Yeah. And I think that's the ultimate outcome is, one, to get them to think, and two, to get them in front of you to have a conversation. Because I think once people can have a logical conversation, which is why I shared the story of that guy that's the electrician, and you can connect with them and then relate it to living clear and what that means in their life, it just makes perfect sense. People will say, it's just so simple. And what's that quote? The so simple confounds the wise, or whatever.
Yeah.
I think we see that everywhere, but I think that would be something to have fun with, because we have so many brilliant minds like yourself in the profession that, that doesn't have to be just one billboard. That could be one Facebook ad that we all put out on a day. Kind of like you do your quotes and things you say and I laugh at the things you put out there, because I'm like, I know that happened at like 2 a.m. and you were just like, and it's brilliant. But if we get a group together and say, okay, the first of the month or every Monday we put out a different one, and it's all the same one, and now it's hitting my 5,000 friends, your 5,000 people, and it just starts spreading like wildfire, we could create a lot of conversations that aren't happening right now.
Here's one. How about, are your answers killing you?
Oh, bro. Are your answers killing you? My man, I've always said it, it, I love you. One of the most brilliant minds in this profession. I think you and Drew Henderson are like my two go-to minds that I just love to connect with, for sure. It'd be fun. We should do like a threesome with us, with me, you, and Drew. And I'll just throw shit out there, let you guys go at it. We're gonna do that. Innate just dropped that in. So Drew and Alvord is just, we got to tell Drew that we got to make sure we can understand him. Love that guy.
I love
But
it.
listen, my man, I love you. You're awesome. Listen, I'm proud of the growth and how chill you become and focused and laser focused and becoming a massive leader in this profession, which is greatly needed. So thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Time is short. The only thing we have is right now.
Amen. Seize the moment, brother.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Love you, buddy.